So I ended up simulating a little less particles. We ended up at, let's see, around 1 million points. And like I said, for a higher quality result, you would probably need around 10 million points, I would say the least. And if I go to this result, let's look through our camera and turn on the high quality lighting. And let's look at a few frames. I think this is actually looking pretty good. And one thing that we can do here to get rid of some of this snow is if I go up, I can go ahead and create for now just the ground geometry. So our ice layer, let's do another geocontainer and let's rename this to FX ground or FX ice. I was a little bit of inconsistent with the naming, so wherever you see ice, it's referring to the ground, and vice versa. If you see somewhere ground, it's going to be the ice. So for example, this geometry container here is named fx_ground, but the texture used for this layer is going to be named ice. So it's going to be ice diffuse, ice roughness, and all that, but it's essentially the ground. Anyway, let's step inside and we can drop a grid, and let's do a color here just so we can preview this better in the viewport. I can also maybe make this a little bit blue to sort of mimic what we are trying to create. And what we can do here is if I drop down a transform node, I can raise this ground a little bit up, so it essentially eats away some of this snow. So if I just increase the translate Y value here just slightly, so I'm using the scroll wheel while holding down shift, and I can increment this by 0.01 values, we can see that now we are basically just placing the ice ground on top of the snow. So we have a little bit of snow here below. And this is how we can get rid of some of this snow. So this will be completely up to you and the results of your simulation. And if you do want to keep the snow or not, but it's just something that we can do to mitigate this effect of the snow covering this area a little bit. And we will come back to this ground later to make further changes here, but for now this will be alright, so it's mostly for visualization purposes so far. Let's go back up and go in our snow container. And for the volume rasterize attributes, let's reduce the voxel size. So in the final render that I used a voxel size of 0.005, so something like this. And we can see now that the snow is really nice and crisp. And I also introduced, or rather I increased the particle scale to 1.1. So I just sort of artificially inflated the particle scale for each of these grains to simply fill out the gaps a little bit more. So this is again depending on your taste. And one other thing that I did in the original render, and I will make some room here to maybe have this a little bit more organized. Another thing that I did in the original render before I used the volume rasterize, I added more points. I essentially duplicated the amount of points that we have with a point replicate to help again to fill in some of these gaps. This isn't super necessary, so if you do have 10 million points that you can work with from the simulation, this might not be a necessary step, and this is also a specific look that you can go for, but this is also just to give you an option of some of the stuff that you can do here. So after the attribute wrangle, I can drop down a pop replicate. So let's drop this here. Points per point. This will mean how many duplicates we will want for each point. So we want 2. For the shape, let's set this to sphere and let's decrease the uniform scale quite a bit. So maybe use 0.01. And we also want to go in the attributes tab and turn on the copy source attributes because we will need to propagate, or rather pass over our density attribute and also our velocity and p-scale in order for this volume rasterize to work. So let's go ahead and plug this here first, and I will save the project file just to make sure that we don't end up spawning 50 million points and Houdini might choke. So make sure that you save this before you check the result. So let's go to the point replicate. Alright, so we end up with 2.5 million points, and let's take a look at the result with our volume rasterize, and here we have it. So if I disable this, hopefully we can see, maybe I can zoom in closer here, and we are displaying a lower quality preview of our volume. In the final render this will look a little bit nicer, but we can see that as I bypass this node, so the point replicate, we fill in the snow a little bit better with this. So it's overall all a little bit denser. Maybe if I go through the camera and I disable this, hopefully we can see that the result that this is giving us. So this is one of the options that you have over here, and basically we can go ahead and straight up render this. So I will do a null here, and this will become out snow. And just because we end up with quite a high resolution volume, so if I go to the information tab here, we can see that this is quite a big grid for the voxels. So it's not too bad, but usually when I'm working with high resolution volumes and I want to render them in Redshift, I prefer using Redshift proxy. So in the render section, we are going to save this out as a Redshift proxy sequence. But anyway, this will be our snow, and we can start working on our dust particles.